Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramana.
Thank you, Michael. So I just want to give a brief introduction of our satsangs. I know it's a little different than the other satsangs that Michael has. Our focus here in Houston is on the original works of Bhagavan. So far we've discussed with Michael Upadēśa Undiyār, Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, and Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu. So 3 of the works we have done. And today we will be starting another work, which is Upadēśa Taṉippākkaḻ. So that's our focus, that on the original works of Bhagavan. Questions and answers not related to the words are actually secondary. The reason we focus on the original works of Bhagavan is and I personally think that's the way to really learn and properly learn and practice Bhagavan's teachings. Only doing Q&As is almost like looking at a math book and only doing the questions, the problems, not really looking at what the formula is, what the theory behind it, and so forth. It's just not, I feel like it's not a good way to learn. And also I've been noticing, sometimes when people ask questions only, I'm not really focusing that much on the original works. They tend to ask the same question over and over again because you just don't get a good grasp of what it is and what Bhagavan's teachings are about. So with that introduction and sort of message, so we'll start with the Upadēśa Taṉippākkaḻ. My first question to Michael is, can you please tell a history of how this came about? Because Upadēśa Taṉippākkaḻ is not in collected works of Ramana, right? So under that heading. So how that came about. So if you can just briefly explain, and then we can go to the verse.
Upadēśa Taṉippākkaļ consists of 27 verses, but Bhagavan composed at different times under different circumstances. Some of them we know the circumstances, most we don't know the circumstances. How it came to be formed into this collection called Upadēśa Taṇippākkaļ is I first met Sadhu Om soon after I arrived in Tiruvannāmala in September 1976. And because I found that he was able to answer whatever questions I asked, I was always looking for opportunities to meet him and to talk to him. So since I knew he was writing a Tamil explanation for Guru Vācaka Kōvai, for which in those days there was no complete English translation, but there was a translation by Professor Swaminathan that was being serialized in the Mountain Path. So sometime in about, I think it was April of 77, I had several times asked Sadhu Om about I was reading those translations in old copies of the Mountain Path, and wherever the meaning of the verses weren't very clear to me, I would ask Sadhu Om about it. So one day he said to me, rather than trying to, because those translations, Professor Swaminathan liked to do it in a type of somewhat poetic English, but it wasn't very accurate. So Sadhu Om said, rather than trying to deal with these less accurate translations, let us try to make our own more accurate translation. So from that day onwards, I was coming to him every day, and he would translate verses. He would usually write his translation. Sometimes he'd write it on a slate, sometimes on slips of paper, but mostly it was on a slate. And then I would read what he had written, and I would ask him questions about it. And often his English wasn't it wasn't very good. I mean, he could express himself very well in English, but it wasn't very grammatical English. So I would ask him questions, and then I would polish the English according to what I understood of what he'd explained to me. So that is how we began translating this. At that time, his Tamil prose rendering of Guru Vācaka Kōvai, it was in the press for more than 6 years. It had already been in the press for several years before I came there. So Sadhu Om would send a batch of manuscripts for a manuscript for a batch of verses to the press. And in those days, it was a very slow process. It was a letterpress printing, so they would have to set all the types in a frame, and then they'd print a proof, and they'd send him a proof, and he'd correct the proof, and it would go back again, and then again it would come back. So it was a slow process, and in the end, it took 6 years to print that book. It was also slow because there were many other demands on Sadhu Om's time. At that time, he was also editing Śivajñāna Bōdham, all the 14,000 odd verses of Muruganar that had never been published. And also there were a constant stream of visitors and everything, so progress was slow. But anyway, in about 1979, let me just say, in Guru Vācaka Kōvai is Muruganar was recording Bhagavan sayings. That's what Guru Vācaka Kōvai means. It's a collection of the Guru's sayings. So whenever Muruganar composed a verse expressing the teaching, Bhagavan would sometimes, often he would approve it, sometimes he would make some corrections. Sometimes he would rewrite the idea in a verse of his own. So in that way, there were eventually, that is, the first edition of Guru Vācaka Kōvai was printed in 1939. At that time, I can't remember how many verses. It was maybe about 20 plus verses of Bhagavans were there. And in 1971, the ashram published an enlarged edition of Guru Vācaka Kōvai, which was edited by Sadhu Om and included all the verses, but all the surviving verses. There's another story about that. Many verses, unfortunately, got lost. But all the surviving verses that weren't in the first edition, but were meant as part of Guru Vācaka Kōvai, that was compiled by Sadhu Om in 1971. And this Guru Vācaka Kōvai, the prose meaning, it was Muruganar who encouraged Sadhu Om to write this, because people often used to come and ask Muruganar the meaning of these verses. And he used to explain them, but towards the end of his life, his health wasn't so good. So, and Sadhu Om would be there every day with him, helping working on Muruganar's verses. So often when people came and asked Muruganar the meaning of verses, he would say, ask Sadhu Om, and Sadhu Om would explain it. So eventually Muruganar said, people just aren't, though this is such a treasure house of Bhagavan's teachings, majority of people just aren't able to understand the verses. Muruganar had written the meaning for some of the verses long before, but he said really it needs a comprehensive explanation for the whole work. So Muruganar encouraged Sadhu Om to write this prose rendering. And it was also at the request of Professor Swaminathan, because Professor Swaminathan, who was translating into English, he was also having difficulty understanding many of the verses. So he would write to Muruganar, and Muruganar would ask Sadhu Om to reply. in the 1971 edition, there were 28 verses which were composed by Bhagavan. And as I say, they were composed by Bhagavan because sometimes Muruganar would write a 4-line verse and Bhagavan would summarize the idea in a 2-line verse. Sometimes Bhagavan would summarize the meaning of 2 verses composed by Muruganar in 1 verse. Sometimes he would just rewrite the idea in a different form. So that's how there came to be 28 verses in Guru Vācaka Kōvai. So those 28 verses are an integral part of Guru Vācaka Kōvai. They were actually composed as a part of it. Those verses are many of them are included in other works. Wait a second, I've just...
And those are the works, those are the verses that are numbered B1, B2, B3, and so forth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
B standing for Bhagavan.
Yes.
So there were, among those 28 verses, 12 of them were, though they were written originally for Guru Vācaka Kōvai, they were later included in Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu Anubandham, a supplement to Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, the 40 verses on what is. One of them is actually in Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, and 2 are in Ekatma Panchakam, which is the final original work of Bhagavan, the final original work that Bhagavan wrote in 1946, I think it was. Suri Nagama has written about it in her letters because it was largely her prompting, because she wanted Bhagavan to compose Vembas, which is a particular Tamil meter. She wanted him to compose them Vembas in Telugu. And of course, Muruganar was also encouraging Bhagavan. And so 2 of the verses of Ekatma Panchakam were actually written as part of Guru Vācaka Kōvai, but were also included in Ekatma Panchakam. So the remaining 13 of them were not previously included in any of Bhagavan's main works. In addition to those 13 verses, there were a number of other verses, but were not included in any of Bhagavan's main works. And because they were not included in any of his main works, they were not available in print. English translations of many of them were included in the English version of collected works. Many of them were not very good translations, but at least they were included there. But the Tamil originals were not available in print in those days. So in 1979, when the printing of Sadhu Om's Guru Vācaka Kōvai Orai, his prose rendering, was nearing completion, I suggested to Sadhu Om that since some of these solitary verses of instruction, of Upadēśa verses of Bhagavan, were not available in print in any other book, I suggested to him, why don't we add them in Guru Vācaka Kōvai? So Sadhu Om put them as an appendix, 11 verses in all at that time. He put them as an appendix at the end of the book, and he suggested where in Guru Vācaka Kōvai they could be added. So that Guru Vācaka Kōvai Orai was finally printed in 1980. Soon after that, Bhagavan's birth, that was about the time of Bhagavan's birth centenary. So soon after Guru Vācaka Kōvai Orai was published, the ashram brought out a small book as one of the special publications for Bhagavan's centenary. That small book, it was a small book in Tamil called Mani Morigalam Taṇippākkaļ. That means precious words and solitary verses. That was a collection of miscellaneous verses and other writings of Bhagavan, but for one reason or another were not included in his Tamil collected works, Sri Ramana. And that book included most of his miscellaneous verses of instruction. So I think, if I remember correctly, all but one of the 11 verses but Sadhu Om had included in the appendix of Guru Vācaka Kōvai Orai were also included in this book, along with so many other miscellaneous writings of Bhagavan and verses that Bhagavan wrote included medicinal verses, traditional herbal remedies and that type of thing. So they're all a collection of miscellaneous writings of Bhagavan. Later, okay, so I'll leave that aside. So a year or two after 1980, when these verses were printed in Guru Vācaka Kōvai and Mani Morigalam, I happened to be looking carefully at one of Muruganar's notebooks, which we used to refer to as the Black Notebook because it happened to have a black cover. So we used to refer to it as Muruganar's Black Notebook. And that was a particularly interesting notebook, or a particularly important notebook, because among many other things, most of it was written in Muruganar's handwriting, but some of it was Bhagavan's handwriting was also there, here and there throughout that notebook, as far as I can remember. But among other things, that notebook contained what we have to consider as the original manuscript of most of the verses of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu. That is, Bhagavan composed Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu over a period of about 3 weeks or so. But he wasn't writing in any particular order. He would write verses, then Muruganar would decide what order to arrange them in. Muruganar would suggest that there were gaps here, gaps there, ask Bhagavan to compose verses. So Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu wasn't written in a sequential order. But in that notebook, the verses are written as and when Bhagavan composed them. So most of them have a date on them. And when I was looking at that, I found that 2 of the verses of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, Bhagavan had originally composed in a somewhat different manner. I mean, a somewhat different form. That's verses 3 and 16. So the original version of those 2 verses were also available there. And most people didn't know anything about them. They'd never been printed before. And either in that notebook or in some other notebook, I found another verse that Bhagavan had composed, which was in 1948. Bhagavan translated Adi Shankara's Atma Bōdham into Tamil. He composed it all in Vemba, which is a 4-line meter. But the last verse was written by Shankara in it was a longer meter. So when Bhagavan first translated it, he translated it as a viritam, a longer meter. But that doesn't match with the other verses of Atma Bodha. And since whatever Bhagavan wrote, not these Upadēśa Taṉippākkaļ verses, because they were just solitary verses. So, but the work, that is the main works, Bhagavan's own main works, and also works that he had translated, these were included in the Tamil Parayana. And to make it easy for people to remember the sequence of verses, Bhagavan, for most of the works he composed in Vemba meter, he made them into what is called Kali Vemba. Kali Vemba is a long Vemba of any number of lines. And how he did that is, at the end of each Vemba, he extended the 3rd line, which linked it to the next verse. So, for example, the 42
verses... 4th line, you mean extended the 4th line?
Sorry, what did I say?
You said 3rd line, but I think you extended the 4th line.
Yes, I meant 4th line. Because the 3rd line, the 4th line has 3 feet instead of 4 feet. I think that's what the crossover in my mind was. So yes, the 4th line. So he'd extend that 4th line, and that would link it to the next verse. So when he composed Atma Bodha in Vemba meter, in order to make it into Kali Vemba, he had to rewrite the final verse, because the final verse wasn't in Vemba. So he rewrote it as what is called a Pahrate Vemba. That's a Vemba that contains anything from 6 to 12 lines. this one, he happened to compose it as a 6-line verse, and then he was able to make the whole work into one Kalivemba. So that 6-line verse, Pakradai is the one that's included in his Tamil collective works. This earlier Viratam version had never been printed. So here were 3 verses that I found, but had not been printed anywhere. So I suggested to Sadhu Om that these should also be added in any future edition of Guru Vācaka Kōvai. And he considered what I said, and he said, okay, and he suggested places where they could be added. But then he said, whereas the 28 verses that are actually in Guru Vācaka Kōvai, they were composed for Guru Vācaka Kōvai, these other 14 verses, that is the 11 that he'd added in an appendix, and these 3 verses, he said they don't really belong in Guru Vācaka Kōvai. They weren't composed as a part of Guru Vācaka Kōvai. So rather than including them in Guru Vācaka Kōvai, it would be better to compile them into a separate work. So he then compiled this Upadēśa Taṉippākkaļ. Upadēśa means instruction or spiritual teaching. Taṇippākkaļ means solitary verses. So this Upadēśa Taṇippākkaļ contains the 13 verses that were composed as part of Guru Vācaka Kōvai, but were not in any of Bhagavan's other main works, plus the 11 verses that Sadhu Om had included in the appendix of Guru Vācaka Kōvai, Orai, plus these 3 verses that we have found more recently. And he called this Upadēśa Taṇippākkaļ. He later, in a later edition of Guru Vācaka Kōvai, published in 1998, I think so. That was the 3rd edition. In that, all these 14 verses were added. But actually, Sadhu Om had told me, once he had decided to include these, to compile this work, Upadēśa Taṇippākkaļ, he said in future editions of Guru Vācaka Kōvai and Guru Vācaka Kōvai Orai, we should not include these 14 verses because they were not actually composed as a part of it. So that's how these 27 verses came to be compiled by Sadhu Om as one work. Sorry, that's a rather long explanation, but that's how it came about.
So total of 27 verses, right?
27 verses.
27 verses.
13 of which are actually part of Guru Vācaka Kōvai, and the other 14 of which are not part of Guru Vācaka Kōvai. Incidentally, later, in 2002, the ashram published an enlarged edition of Ramana Rūtaratu, the Tamil collective works, in which they included most of the contents, but not all of them, most of the contents of the booklet that was published in 1980, Mani Morigalam Taṇippākkaļam. They included that as an appendix. And they included a few other things, including these 3 verses that I have found, and one other verse of Upadēśa, but I think wasn't included in the earlier edition of Mani Morigalam. So now all these things are available in print, but there's never. Oh, and as I say, many of these verses have been were included. Many. That is, English translations were included under headings like 9 stray verses and I think miscellaneous or occasional verses or something like that. They are there in the English translation in the English version of collective works, which is actually arranged in a completely different order to the order it is in the Tamil book. That's beside the point. Anyway, so this is how this work came to be formed. So I'm now revising my translation because Kumar asked me to talk about these. I'm now revising my translations of them. A couple of days ago, I think it was, I posted an incomplete version of this. That is, all the verses are there, but I still have to add many translations and notes and
As we go along.
explanations and things, which
Yeah.
I'll be doing over the course of the next few weeks to make it complete.
So basically, Michael, so the 28 B verses, Bhagavan verses, that is in Guru Vācaka Kōvai, they're all accounted for, between Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu Anubandham and
12 in
Upadēśa
Anubandham,
Taṉippākkaļ.
1 in Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, 2 in Ekkamma and 13 are now in, the other 13
In
are now
Upadēśa
in
Taṉippākkaļ, which we'll be
Yeah.
discussing. So, right. So all 28 Bhagavan verses that are in Guru Vācaka Kōvai will all be covered, in the series on original works of Bhagavan.
And they're now all in Bhagavan's Tamil Ramanujaratu, but not in the proper order. They're not arranged in the proper order. This Sadhu Om arranged them nicely in an order. So it's a bit like a supplement to Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu Anubandham. Oh, that's one other thing. Whereas Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu Anubandham, most of the verses are verses that Bhagavan translated from other sources. I think there were only about 15 that were partly or wholly his own original works. In Upadēśa Taṉippākkaļ, 19 of these 27 verses are his own original writings, and only 8 of them he translated from other sources. So actually there are more of Bhagavan's original writings in Upadēśa Taṇippākkaļ than there are in Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu Anubandham.
So that's the story behind Upadēśa Taṇippākkaļ, which is translated as solitary verses of instruction.
Yeah.
Right, Michael?
So spiritual teaching, I think I called it.
Right. So with that introduction, so I'll let Michael now explain the first verse today, which is the subject of today's discussion. And after that, when we have time, we'll look at some other questions too. Go ahead, Michael. Thank you.
Okay. Before I tell the meaning of this, I should first say this is not an original verse of Bhagavan. This is Bhagavan translated the first verse of a Sanskrit text called Śivajñāna Bōdham, which is a small work, but it's considered as a central, one of the fundamental works on the philosophy of Śaiva Siddhānta. Śaiva Siddhānta is a system of Shaivite philosophy. It is, to a large extent, dualistic. But that is like all these things in India, all these different systems of philosophy and different sampradayas, they evolved over time. So some of the earliest works which Śaiva Siddhānta claim as their own, of course, they include all the devotional works of Nayanas, that is Tirunjana Sambandha, Appa and Sundaramurti, and also Manikavasaka. Their works are included they're considered core works of Śaiva Siddhānta, but they're devotional works, not philosophical works. Also, one of the oldest texts that they have great reverence for is Tirumula's Tirumantaram. That is a very large work, but includes a lot of different spiritual teachings. Some of them are somewhat tantric in nature. Some of them, there's also clear Advaita theme running through many of them. But anyway, the Śaiva Siddhāntans, generally, they interpret these things in a dualistic way. And this Śivajñāna Bōdham is a later work, but it's a work that is considered to be the core of Śaiva Siddhānta philosophy. So it's not strictly a Vedantic work. The circumstances under which Bhagavan translated this, I don't know. But we can explain it in the light of Bhagavan's teachings. It actually can be explained quite nicely in the light of Bhagavan's teachings. I think this may be why Bhagavan translated it, because it does give room for us to say this is not the final teaching. I'll read the verse and then well, I'll explain clause by clause, and then I'll explain the meaning of the whole verse. So the verse begins, the first clause is, Pen an ali mudal, am petrial, kārya mam kannokal. That means because of the view in which it is by nature an effect, which is beginning with male, female, and ali. Ali means those who are neither wholly male or wholly female. Because in ancient India, it was recognized that that gender is not a simple binary thing. Though the majority of us are typical male or typical female, there are many people who aren't wholly male or wholly female. They transgender people, or what nowadays are called non-binary people, and homosexuals. Everything is included under Ali. Ali means those who are neither wholly male nor wholly female. An effect which is beginning with male, female, and those who are neither. So because of that view, one doer who produces exists as the cause of the world. Sorry, I didn't read that. Ivulahin karanana pan o karatun ullan. That means one doer who produces exists as the cause of this world. And then the next sentence is avan kasani maitu arkum. That means having destroyed, he creates this world. And final sentence is karatun aran karatu. Consider the doer to be Hara. The doer here means the creator, the one who exists as the cause of the world. So my translation of the whole verse is a literal translation without adding anything. Because of the view in which it is by nature an effect, which is beginning with male, female, and those who are neither, one doer who produces exists as the cause of this world. Having destroyed, he creates this world. Consider the doer to be Hara. And then my explanatory paraphrase of that is, because of the view in which it is seen to be by nature a kārya, effect, which is composed of multitude of diverse forms, beginning with male, female, and those who are neither wholly male nor wholly female, one who produces it exists as the kārana, cause of this world. So if the world is an effect, there has to be a cause. You can't have an effect without a cause. But okay, I'll read on. He destroys and creates this world. Consider this doer to be Hara. Hara means it's a name of Lord Shiva. What is important here is the reason why, that is, if the world is an effect, it must have a cause. But is it an effect? It's because we see it as an effect. That's why this first clause is very important, because of the view in which it is by nature an effect. Because of the view means because of the view in which it is seen to be an effect. So long as we see this world, it seems to us to be an effect. So what was every effect must have a cause. And every cause must be the effect of a previous cause, but you can't go back. You can't have an endless series of causes. So there must be some original cause. Who is the original cause who brought this whole world into being? That is Hara. That is God. And he not only creates the world, he also destroys it, because whatever comes into being must also cease to be. So he's not only the creator, but also the destroyer. So I will now go through the explanation I gave for it. This verse provides an argument for the existence of God based on the principle that every effect, kārya, must have a cause, karana. However, cause and effect are a dvandva, a pair of opposites. And as Bhagavan points out in verse 9 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, all pairs of opposites depend for their seeming existence upon ego, in whose view alone they seem to exist. So if we investigate and know the reality of ego, namely Atma Svarūpa, ourself as we actually are, ego will be found to be ever non-existent, and hence all pairs of opposites will cease to exist along with it. Therefore, the teaching given in this verse is suitable for us so long as we view the world as being a real mind-independent effect, because a real effect must have a real cause. This is why most religions begin by teaching that the world is a creation of God. However, whatever comes into being must eventually cease to be. So if God is the cause that has created this world, he must also be the cause that will eventually destroy it, as pointed out in the second sentence of this verse. That is, having destroyed, he creates. That's the meaning of the second verse. For those who consider this or any other world to be a source of joy, the role of God as the creator will be considered to be most important. Whereas for those who by his grace come to understand that any world is a source of suffering, his role as the destroyer will be considered most important. That is, if we consider most of the religions in the world, or at least the God-based religions in the world, they all talk about God as the creator. I mean, this is particularly so in the Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. God is revered as the creator. But not only in these religions, God is also revered as the creator in Hinduism also. But in Hinduism, they talk about it is talked about three things: creation, sustenance, and dissolution. That is, the world having been created, there must be something that sustains it and something that eventually dissolves it. So these three, Srishti, Sthiti, and Samsāra, these are considered as three functions of God. And they're what are called the Trimurti. The Trimurti of the three forms of God. Of course, it's all the same one God, but different forms of God assign different functions according to the mythology, or whatever we call it. I mean, mythology isn't said with any disrespect, because the mythology has deep meaning. But among the Trimurtis, Brahma is the creator, Vishnu is the sustainer, and Śiva is the destroyer. That's how it's generally understood. That doesn't mean they're three different gods. They are three different forms of the same one God. At least that's from the Advaitic point of view. Others may disagree and have different views. So there are so many different. Hinduism is not a single religion. It is a whole family of religions with different views, different practices. so there are different ways of viewing the same thing, but I'm talking largely from the Advaitic perspective. So all these three are three different forms of the same God. It is significant that in Hinduism, the two main gods who are worshipped are Vishnu and Shiva, the sustainer and the destroyer, not Brahma, the creator. Brahma, I think, presides over some of the Vedic rituals, but I believe there's only one main temple in India for Brahma. I can't remember. I've heard about it, but there is somewhere a temple for Brahma. But there are many, many thousands of temples for Vishnu and for Shiva and for so many other gods and goddesses. So though Brahma is the creator, he gets to be worshipped only in one temple because there's a recognition, though most people may not yet be ready to assimilate the implications of this, that the underlying philosophy of Vedanta, and this also is common to also many other systems of Indian philosophy, including Śaiva Siddhānta, this world is considered as samsara, and samsara is bandha, is bondage. Samsara means this cycle of birth and death, the perpetual, that involves perpetual activity. From the time we are born to the time we die, we do so many actions by mind, speech, and body. And in samsara, we experience so many joys and sorrows. So samsara, we may experience a few joys here and there, but the price to be paid for any joy we experience it's often accompanied by sorrow, pain in some form or other. So this samsara is an unsatisfactory state. The reason it is unsatisfactory is because, again, I'm talking from the Advaitic perspective, particularly from the perspective of Bhagavan's teaching. The reason it is unsatisfactory is that, as explained by Bhagavan, our real nature is infinite happiness. So when we rise as ego, by rising as ego, we are limiting ourselves. We are limiting our infinite nature to the finite form of a particular body, particular person. So as this seemingly finite creature, we cannot experience the infinite happiness that we actually are. In order to experience that infinite happiness, we need to know ourselves as we actually are. And when we know ourselves as we actually are, we'll no longer mistake ourselves to be this person. So samsara is whether you're in heaven or in hell, you cannot escape misery because it's an unsatisfactory state. So long as we rise as ego, we will always be hankering for that infinite happiness that is our own real nature. And we'll try to find that happiness in this worldly pleasure or that worldly pleasure. We'll think if we acquire wealth, or if we acquire power, or if we acquire learning, or if we have a very beautiful body, or if we have a very sweet-natured husband or wife, and nice children and kind parents and everything, we think we'll be happy. But of course, none of us, life isn't perfect for anyone. And even if we have all the things we want, even if we have wealth and power and learning and wisdom and all these things, nothing will satisfy us, because none of these things can give us the infinite happiness that is our own real nature. So samsara is an intrinsically unsatisfactory condition. This is recognized in almost all forms of Hinduism. And when here I would include in that very broad family, whether we call it Hinduism or not, that Hinduism is a modern label for it, but it includes Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism, all these, they're one family of religions. And in all these religions, there's the central idea of samsara and nirvana, bondage and liberation. So most of us want to continue in this samsara. We want to enjoy this embodied existence. We just want more of the pleasure and less of the pain. So that's all the Vedic, the ritual portion of the Vedas is all based upon that. Most people who go to temples to worship, what they want is they go for the removal of the difficulties and for getting whatever they want. And include that in getting what they want, because we recognize that this embodied existence is temporary. We want to, when this life comes to an end, we want a better life. So we want to go to heaven, we don't want to go to hell, all these sort of things. So because in Hinduism, or Hinduism generally, all forms of India spirituality that originate from India, what are sometimes called the dharmic religions, there's this recognition that samsara is bondage, and that our ultimate goal must be to seek freedom from, to escape from this samsara, to attain liberation. That is why Brahma, the god of creation, is not so highly revered. Those who are most highly revered are Vishnu and Shiva. And Shiva in particular is the destroyer. He's the one who puts an end to it all. Although according to this verse, the Śaiva-Siddhānta view, they say Hara, Lord Shiva, he not only destroys the world, he creates it and he destroys it, but he does both, according to Śaiva-Siddhānta. There are so many different views. But if we recognize that the unsatisfactory nature of this world, we will not attach much importance to God's role as creator. We'll attach more importance to his role as the destroyer. The name Hara, so I'll just continue sort of elaborate. Whatever comes into being must also cease to be. So if God is the cause that has created this world, he must also be the cause that will eventually destroy it, as pointed out in the second sentence of this verse. For those who consider this or any other world to be a source of joy, the role of God as the creator will be considered most important. Whereas for those who by his grace come to understand that any world is a source of suffering, his role as the destroyer will be considered most important. That's why God in the form of Lord Shiva is called Hara. Hara means the remover or destroyer, because he removes the root of all suffering by destroying ego, the I that rises as I am this body, and that consequently experiences the illusory appearance of a world with all its seeming joys and sorrows. Since our real nature is infinite happiness, when ego is eradicated by the grace of Lord Arunachala Shiva, who appeared in human form as Bhagavan Ramana, what will then remain is only beginningless Anādi, infinite ananta, and undivided akhaṇḍa, being, awareness, joy, sat-cit-ānanda, which is what we always actually are, as Bhagavan teaches us in verse 28 of Upadēśa Undiyār, in which he says, if one knows what the real nature of oneself is, then Anādi, ananta, akhaṇḍa, sat-cit-ānanda, beginningless, infinite, and unbroken being awareness. So long as we rise as ego, the world seems to be real, and God, the power that seems to have created it and to be sustaining it, seems to be something other than ourselves. But when by his grace we turn our mind within to seek him with intense love in the depth of our own heart, we will find him to be our own very being, and hence all appearance of separation and otherness will be dissolved forever in the infinite light of sat-cit-ānanda, which is the very being of both God and ourself. So what is said in this verse, Bhagavan doesn't disagree with this verse, but if we want to understand it from Bhagavan's point of view, the main thing to understand is the reason that God is said to be the creator or the cause is because we see this world as an effect, which inevitably we do. If so long as we see the world, it seems to us to be an effect. I mean, cause and effect we see everywhere, and everything that is now is caused by something that came before it. So what is the original cause? It is God. That is why all religions begin by teaching that God is the creator of the world, and God is revered as the creator of the world. But more important than his role as creator, for those who are seeking liberation, his role as the destroyer, the one who removes all this illusory appearance of this world. So that is why the verse ends, consider the doer to be Hara. So we can explain this verse nicely in the light of Bhagavan's teachings. We don't have to subscribe to the dualistic philosophy of Śaiva Siddhānta. But I mean, Bhagavan is not opposed to any other system of philosophy, because from Bhagavan's point of view, all these different philosophies, these different teachings, these different traditions, sampradayas, they're all appropriate to us at different stages of our spiritual development. So Bhagavan sometimes pointed out the limitations and shortcomings of other systems of philosophy, but he never condemned them entirely, because they all had their own place in the long journey of spiritual development. So this verse, in a sense, we can say it provides a nice bridge between the dualistic view and the non-dualistic view. It's only because we see it as an effect that we have this dualistic view. But there's a God and ourself. Well, there's a world which we're seeing. There's ourself who are seeing it, and there's a God who is the power that is behind the whole thing, who has created, destroyed, created, sustaining, and will eventually destroy it.
So it's a conditional statement, basically.
It's a conditional statement, yes. He doesn't say if, he says because we all inevitably, so long as we take ourselves to be this body, we will experience a world. And that world will always seem to be an effect. So what is the original cause of this effect? I mean, according to Bhagavan, the original cause is our rising as ego, because cause and effect come into being only when we rise as ego.
And you have the Sanskrit original of this verse, right?
Yes, I've given that here. Sri Pumna Pumsaka Sakadi. It's a bit difficult for me to read it, but anyway, it's there for those who want to read it. And I think I've also seen translations of it. Sometimes when Bhagavan translates verses, they're more of an adaptation, but this one, I think it's a fairly accurate translation.
Another, I wasn't even aware that there were Sanskrit verses on the Śivajñāna Bōdham. I thought it was only in Tamil.
No,
So the same
Śivajñāna
author,
Bōdham is a Sanskrit work.
But here I am looking at a Tamil version of it.
Well, maybe
I have a copy.
Maybe others have translated it, but the original is Sanskrit.
In Sanskrit, okay.
Because nowadays, Śaiva Siddhānta is generally, well, Śaiva Siddhānta is a philosophy that is prevalent mostly in Tamil Nadu nowadays. But there was a time when it was throughout India, there were, it was a India-wide philosophy.
Right.
And Śaiva Siddhānta and what is nowadays called Kashmir Shaivism, they were very closely related, and they sort of, at some point, they branched off. Śaiva Siddhānta was a more dualistic, had a more dualistic tendency. Kashmir Shaivism had a more non-dualistic tendency. But from the perspective of Advaita Vedanta, even Kashmir Shaivism's claim to be non-dualistic is it's not really non-dualistic from the Advaitic point of view, because they still they believe they accept that the world is real. They accept all of this is Shiva's Leela. So they accept multiplicity, but they say so it's Kashmir Shaivism, it's a monistic system. Ultimately, everything is Shiva. But if according to Advaita, there's one only without a second. So how to explain all this multiplicity? It can't be real. If there's only one, manyness must be an appearance. Whereas in Kashmir Shaivism, though it's much more non-dualistic than Śaiva Siddhānta, it's not wholly non-dualistic because they take the appearance to be real. Their criticism of Advaita is they say Advaita distinguishes between the real and the unreal. They say that is duality. But if it's unreal, that means it doesn't actually exist. So many different views people have.
Yeah.
Ultimately, what view appeals to us, what view we're attracted to, depends upon our spiritual maturity.
Right. And even Śaiva Siddhānta, it's the latter interpretation that moved towards dualism. But we go back to the core text, the original text, which is Tirumoolar's Tirumandram. It's very clear. In fact, there is one verse where he says Vedanta and Siddhānta are one and the same. In another words, he says, unbasic, like love is Shiva, love is God. Love alone is God.
Yeah.
And there are many verses here where he clearly points towards non-dualism, and then it just that so happened the latter interpretation slowly moved away from it.
Even among the Śaiva Agamas are very fundamental texts in Śaiva Siddhānta, because they're the texts on which the worship in Shiva temples is based on the Śaiva Agamas. So mostly they are dualistic. But Bhagavan found among the Śaiva Agamas, he found two chapters that were very non-dualistic in their approach. That is the one chapter in Devi Kalotram, Jnana Chara Vichara Padalam, and what's it? Devi Kalotram.
And Sarvajnanotram Atma Sakshatkara Praharanam.
Yeah. So these are two chapters in two different Śaiva Agamas, but are very non-dualistic. So Bhagavan translated them. So there's no hard and fast division between all these things.
Yeah. So coming back to this verse, and one point that, sort of in practical considerations wise, what you mentioned that really struck me is that for some, God as a preserver seems important, and for some, God as a destroyer seems important. For we as students of Bhagavan's teachings, in which we are trying to seek to destroy the ego, I think God as a destroyer makes more sense.
Yes.
Probably more appealing to us.
Arunachala
Because we
mena
wanted
ahamainene pava ahateve rarupai Arunachala. That is Arunachala particularly. He's the destroyer of the root cause of all of this, which is ego.
Right. So that's another one point. Another one that I noticed in this verse is how he is pointing out, he didn't stop to say male, female. He says male, an, pen, ali, male, female, and those who are neither. It is a very explicit acknowledgement of the third gender. And very respectful. That is something that also
and that this also in Arunachala Navamani Malai.
Exactly.
He's also used exactly the same term in verse 3, I think is it.
So in the original words also I noticed it, and this is something unique to have an acknowledgement. In
verse
the world
4,
there's
he ends Pennan ali yuru nanna oli yuru banna anal enaham nannaye. That so he addresses Arunachala as the Lord, who is a form of light, but is untouched by these different forms of male, female, and Ali. Because whatever whether we say, I am a man, I am a woman, I am transgender, I am non-binary, I'm heterosexual, I'm homosexual, I'm bisexual, or whatever it is, what is common to all is I am. That is Bhagavan, that is Arunachala. So how can he discriminate against? So this is, but it's not just Bhagavan. In ancient India, these things were accepted as very. It's just a part of life. Not everyone.
Exactly. Right. That's right. That's
female.
the point that I see it in the original words too on Śivajñāna Bōdham, that use of the word, anpen and words anpen and ali. So was sort of happy to see that it's been there and very well acknowledged. In ancient texts.
I think even in Manusmriti he talks about Tritiya Prakriti, the third gender. It was, and throughout India, in fact, throughout the Indian subcontinent, because it's not only in India, even in Pakistan and other places, these in North India they call them hijras, men who dress as women. They are what is referred to here as Ali, and was very much a part of Indian culture, but unfortunately well, I think part of the influence was the influence of British rule, but the homosexuality was made illegal in Victorian Britain, and they also imposed that in the Indian statute book, and Indians were brought up to view their own culture through a Western perspective, particularly a Christian type of perspective, a very narrow view of things. So the hijras were rather sidelined in Indian society. Whereas previously, I think in old days, they were considered very auspicious. If a hijra or a group of hijras came to a wedding, that was considered a blessing for the couple. And in Tamil Nadu, there's a particular, I've forgotten what it's called, there's a particular important temple, which the deity in that temple, I think, is some character from the Purana. I think I can't remember which character, but it was one of the characters. That temple is worshipped mainly by Ali people, but when they have a festival, everyone comes to attend the festival.
Right. And then So the translation doesn't capture it. That is just actually one word in Tamil, Ali, but because of you're not able to express it, you translate it as those who are neither. But in Tamil, it's just Ali. That's just as you say male, female, and then there's one word for it, which is Ali. So I know you and other translators struggle to translate it. You say it's neither male nor female, but that's not how it is in the
original. Or neuter, some
That's,
people have translated it, but nobody claims to be neuter. But the word Ali actually means, it comes from the root of al, which is not. That is, in Tamil, there are two negatives. There's il and al. Il negates existence. Al negates an attribute. So if you want to say something doesn't exist, you say il. If you want to say something is not, A is not B, you use al.
Exactly. So, okay, so now let me go to Sanjay. Says he's got a question related to this verse. Go ahead, Sanjay.
Yes,
Sanjay, go ahead. Yeah.
Yes, sir. So, sir, in this verse, it is said the kārya means the effect, kārya.
Yes.
So, I thought kārya means an action or means a job, that I am doing this kārya well. So, how do you, that's my general understanding. I'm not sure.
Kārya has that is, the same word has different applications in different contexts. So when we're talking of kārya, kārya means effect. In other contexts, kārya means what needs to be done, what ought to be done, or what needs to. So it has so many different meanings dependent on the context. This is true of many, many words. Words don't many words don't have a single meaning. The meaning of a word is determined by the context in which it is used.
Got it, sir. So on your question, you just now said that when Hijras attended a marriage, it was considered auspicious. But nowadays we shun them out. Oh, go away from here. What is that mindset now? Why were they considered auspicious then?
Cultures never remain the same. Cultures are influenced by so many things. Part of it is because hijras were sidelined, were pushed to the edges of society, so to speak. Their source of livelihood, they were deprived of their traditional sources of livelihood. So often nowadays they will come and pester people for money and things. So attitudes have changed. Attitudes in society, throughout history, attitudes have been changing over all sorts of things. Like the caste system, it's not a fixed thing. That is the role of caste in society has been changing in so many ways. If we see in the if you, for example, in the Mahabharata, Vyasa, Veda Vyasa, the one who arranged the Vedas, one who recorded the Mahabharata. I mean, so many things attributed to Veda Vyasa. Who were his parents? His father was a rishi. His mother was a fisherwoman. So but nowadays that would be if a Brahmin were to marry a fisherwoman, the child wouldn't be considered a Brahmin, certainly wouldn't be considered a rishi. So these things change over time. Societies, the world is ever changing. It's just the nature of things.
Right.
As Buddha said, anitya, anitya, sarvam anitya. Impermanent, everything is impermanent. Vedanta agrees with that, except one thing. That which is permanent is sat-cit, I am, our own being. That is, and what is permanent alone is what is real. Everything else is changing.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. So, and then Rati's got a question. Go ahead, Rati.
Yeah, Michael, it's very interesting. First, I wanted to say about Hara, but before we go into all that, I want to talk about Or Mudal, the self, which is more to do with Bhagavan's teachings and Śivajñāna Bōdham. Now, going to the Or Mudal or the self, you've often explained that we think in terms of dvanda, the duality, and Śaivism thinks in terms of dvanda and muputi. That is that the seer, the seen, and the seer, seen, the seer, and the seen. But all of that we have to think of it really as the seeing mind, which you explained very well in your verse, in your explanation. The seeing mind. But before that, we want to talk about the kārya and the kārana, the causeless, the agent, and the kārana. So we're talking there about that. But getting back to the muputi and this thing, there is the seeing mind, the world picture that it sees, and which is when we see the rope as a snake or the snake as a rope. See the samsara, the world picture that we see, the light of consciousness we see by, which is the deepa or the atma swarupa, the light within, the light of consciousness we see by, and the ground or the underlying substratum, which is the underlying ground, which, for instance, like with a screen of a movie screen, projecting a movie of the world, the underlying screen, the substratum, is what we also have to know and be aware of. So, but all of these are this creation, sustenance, and dissolution is really the function of ego. And the role of ego is what Bhagavan always emphasizes. He goes back and back and back and hammers into us from every teaching of his. It is the ego that arises, that creates the world. It's the ego that we have to destroy. It's the ego that gives rise to sorrow. It's the ego that does not allow us to perceive our real nature, which is happiness. So all of this comes back to ego. So ego is the one we have to destroy, right? And then again, I want to just ask you about Hara. Hara is often said in India. Now, what is the Hara part of it?
I'm not sure, but I imagine it is like namas. Before a word becomes namo. After, like we say namo Ramanaya, but we I don't know, but it's to do with Sandhi rules in Sanskrit. I think that is I think that is the reason.
Is it destroyer and preserver? Hara.
Well, no. Even no, I don't think that's what it means. There are two words. There's Hara and there's Hari. Vishnu is referred to as Hari.
Hari, yes.
But they both actually come from the same root. They both mean I think the root is, I think the verb hri is to remove. So it essentially Hari and Hara mean the same, but they're interpreted slightly differently.
Okay, I see.
But according to, I mean, even in the Vishnu Purana, Vishnu in one place in the Vishnu Purana, apparently I've not read it, but I've heard, Vishnu says, those who think that Shiva and I are different have not understood either Shiva or me. So, I mean, there's so many, that all these Puranas and all these different sacred texts, they cater for different
levels of understanding.
Different views, because different views are appropriate to people at different levels of spiritual development.
Yes.
You can also find plenty of things in the Puranas that say Shiva is superior or Vishnu is superior. You also find many things that say, no, they're one and the same. So all these things are there to suit people of different outlooks. Ultimately, it's all because, as it said in this verse, that is the important word in this verse is kannokal, because of the view, because it's how we view things. And the Sanskrit word, there's no exact equivalent for the word philosophy in Indian languages, but the equivalent term for philosophy is darshana. Darshana means view. So all these different philosophies, they're just different views, different ways of seeing the same thing. That's why the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, the Brahma Sutra, they've been interpreted in so many different ways because the same thing is viewed differently by different people. The world, how we see the world, it's viewed differently by different people.
Right. And
If
again,
we
going
viewed it the same, the world would be a very peaceful place, but we don't view it the same. We're all
Yes.
seeing it from our own narrow perspective.
Yes.
And so we get into all conflicts and wars and all sorts of trouble,
Yes. We
politics
worry
and
about all
everything.
these things which are not really, and,
Yeah.
and they don't exist. I mean, nothing
Yeah.
really exists, but I am.
Yeah.
Nothing exists, but the I
Yeah.
am. But anyway, getting back to again what Kumar was saying, on this path, on Bhagavan's path, the importance is to focus on God as Shiva, the destroyer, because we need to destroy our ego. And ego is the one that rises and gives rise to the phantom, that akhaṇḍa, which is causing all the problems for us. So we have to get rid of that. Again, but getting back to the An, Pen, and Ali, I would also think that, the it is also refers to as other. And isn't Bhagavan himself referred to often as other?
Adu, yes.
And not
Because
really as him or a her.
He's beyond all these,
He's
he's
beyond
beyond
other,
all
he's beyond
differences.
An and Pen. Yeah, he's beyond
Yeah.
An and Pen. And he's
Yeah.
other. He's an it.
Yeah,
He's an
yeah.
it. And
Yeah,
we're all an it.
In Bhagavan's lifetime, people often referred to him as Adu, which means
Adu,
it or
yeah,
that.
right. Exactly. Yeah. And then actually it's easier, better to think of ourselves as it actually. Then we don't have to worry about
Best of all is to consider him as I.
Yes, I am.
It's
Yes.
only when we see him as other, but we refer to him as he or she or it.
Yes, that's dvanda. That's dvanda. To think in dvanda and duality.
Yeah.
And avoid that and think of him as I am and none other than me.
Yeah,
Eka aiva advaitam. Him as none other than me.
Yeah.
Right, absolutely.
However, there's one other thing. You referred to this first verse of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, the first verse of the main text. So that was another thing I wanted to mention in connection with this verse. That is, there are many different arguments for the existence of God. This first verse of Śivajñāna Bōdham, the first verse of Upadēśa Taṉippākkaḻ, gives one argument for the existence of God, basically based on the idea of cause and effect. A more subtle argument is given by Bhagavan in the first verse of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, but that's the first verse of the main text. What he says here in the first verse is, he begins with the words Nam Ullahum Kandalal, because we see the world, or more literally, because of by we seeing the world. That means because we see the world. So if we didn't see the world, there'd be no need to postulate anything. It's because we see the world. Then he says, Nānavam Shakti Ulla o Mudale Oppal Orutalaye. Accepting one fundamental that has a power that becomes many is certainly the one best option. What is the logic here? That is, we who see the world are one. So it's one seeing many. Mm-hmm. So the best option is to accept, but there's one fundamental that has a power. They put Nana Vam Shakti. That means that is many or that becomes many. But what it implies in this context, that is seen as many. That is, what actually exists, according to Bhagavan, is only one. There's only one thing.
Yeah.
That one thing is seen as many. So it has this, that one thing has this power to be seen as many. And he uses a term here, orutalaye. Many people have translated this, is certain or something. But I don't think that's what Bhagavan means here, because in the very next verse, he says, he talks about three different views. Each religion initially accepts three fundamentals. Contending one fundamental stands as three fundamentals. Three fundamentals are always three fundamentals, is only so long as ego exists. The three fundamentals are world, soul, and God, as he made clear in the Kalivemba version. So so long as we rise as ego, we see a world. And we have to recognize that there's some power beyond that world. So all the religions, they talk about these three things, God, world, and soul. Some say that these three are always three. They're always separate. Some say there's one fundamental that appears as all these three. But Bhagavan says all these arguments, it's only possible so long as ego exists. So Bhagavan is recognizing, yes, there are other views. Some people prefer to see not that there's one fundamental, but that there's three fundamentals. And of those three fundamentals, there's a superior one, which is God, and the inferior one, which is us and the world, the inferior ones. So Bhagavan isn't saying this is the only option, but he's saying this is the best option. It's the simplest. Because if we accept that the world is real, we come to so many complications. But if we accept it's all just an appearance, then there's one thing that appears as many, then that is the simplest option. There's something that is referred to as Occam's razor. Occam's razor is the principle of parsimony. Parsimony means what is the simplest explanation. If you observe some phenomenon, there may be so many ways of explaining it, but it's generally best to choose the simplest explanation rather than choosing the more complicated explanation, because the more complicated the explanation, the more elements it contains which could be wrong. So the simpler explanation is more likely to be true than the more complicated ones. So the simplest explanation is that it's one power that is seen as many. And then he says, the picture of names and forms, that's the world, the one who sees, that is ego, the cohesive screen and the pervading light. The cohesive screen is the background on which all this, like the screen in a cinema, the background on which all this appears, and the pervading light is the awareness by which all these things appear. And attanayum tanam avan. All these are he who is oneself. So this is a much more refined way of inferring the existence of one first principle than this Śivajñāna Bōdham way. Śivajñāna Bōdham is also a good way, but this is a more refined way. More refined even than this is the first Mangalam verse of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, because that is something that nobody can dispute. In this first verse of the main text of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, Bhagavan said this is the best option. Others can say, no, I don't like that option. I prefer to think of God as eternally separate. Okay, you're welcome to it. But what he says in the first Mangalam verse is something nobody can dispute. Uḷḷadu, Uḷḷadu, Ullaporul, Uļḷado. If what exists were not, would existing awareness exist? That is what he's saying here. There has to be something that is, because if it weren't for something that is, there couldn't be awareness, because awareness is existing awareness. It's the awareness that is. So if what is were not, would awareness that is be? No, it wouldn't. Obviously wouldn't. So there's one thing that cannot be denied. There is something that exists. And then he goes on to say, since that existing substance or being substance exists in the heart without thought, how to think of that being substance, which is called the heart, being in the heart as it is, alone is thinking, alone is meditating upon it. Know this. So, but that first sentence, he's giving the one argument nobody can dispute. There's a verse in Guru Vācaka Kōvai where Bhagavan, I can't remember the exact meaning of the verse, but in effect, what Bhagavan is saying is nobody is an atheist. Because even the atheist does not deny their own existence, their own being.
Yes.
Nobody says, I am not. We all say,
Yes.
well, one thing we have to all agree is I am.
I am.
Yeah.
That I am is God.
Yes.
So the God they are, but why they are denying God? Because they think of God as something other than themselves. Because religions tell them there's God is up there in heaven, or God is hidden in everything. No, Bhagavan says God is the most obvious thing of all. The one thing we know before we know any other thing is I am. And that I am is God.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's why we need to have Ananya Bhava rather than Anya Bhava. And Ananya Bhava is knowing that there is only one. And even Bhagavan said the number one gives rise to all other numbers.
Yeah.
So don't give rise to any other numbers except stay with the number one. One and the one only, and Ekam of Advaitam, that exactly. So
and if there's only one, we can't be other than that one. So
yes.
how to meditate on that one? We have to meditate on ourselves. How to meditate on ourselves? We have to be as we are.
Yes. And being as we are is that Purna Vastu, that Purnam or completeness, that Purna Vastu, that is the I am, that Purna Vastu is complete, and that's the Hridayam, the Guha Namah Shivaya, or Shiva within our Guha or our heart, our Hridayam, right? So that is Guha in our heart, or in our heart awareness. Awareness, the light that shines behind all of this existence and everything else. So we have to maintain alertness, awareness, and all times be alert and aware.
Yes, alert to and aware of our own being.
Our own being, yes.
Not allowing our mind to be diverted away towards anything else.
Yes.
We just need to, that is what Bhagavan refers to as Svarūpa Dhyana or Svarūpa-smaraṇa. That uninterrupted remembrance of our own being.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Radhi. So
thank you,
now let's have two more questions. So Ravi is asking, so according to Advaita, this world of cause and effect governed by the laws of karma is but an illusory dream within the sleep of our ignorance.
Yes, exactly.
Given this, what is the intent behind Bhagavan's teaching of an ordainer or the providential God who doles out the fruits of action to the individual ego?
So long as as we experience ourselves as the doer, that is what is doing the action. It's the mind, speech, and body. It's because we identify this mind, speech, and body as I, but we experience ourselves as the doer. And when we take ourselves to be a mind, speech, and body, there's also a world. So all this karma seems to be real so long as we rise as ego. But if there's karma, there must be some power that decides or that determines what fruit is appropriate for which action. So that the action, the karma itself is jada, as Bhagavan says in the first verse of Upadēśa Undiyār. It is kartana, that is Karma payandalo kartana danayal. Karma giving fruit is by the ordainment of God. It is God who determines what action is to give which fruit. So Bhagavan said, so long as we experience ourselves as a person, we experience a world, and we have to accept that at the same level of reality, there is a power that is governing it all. That power is God. So God is as real as the world, and God and the world are as real as ego. If we investigate ego, we will find that what appeared as God and world is nothing but our own being. So the reality of God is what we actually are. But so long as we rise as ego, God seems to be something other than ourselves. That's why he says in Upadēśa Undiyār, verse 24, Irkum ekayal isa jivagal oru porle ava. That is, Irkum ekayal, by their being nature, God and jiva are one substance. What is that one substance? Their being. So in our being and the being of God are one and the same. So how come we seem to be something different from God? Upadi unave veru. It's the awareness of adjunct, because we're aware of ourselves as I am this body, then God seems to be something separate from ourselves. Because we've limited ourselves, our own unlimited real nature seems to be something other than ourselves. So Bhagavan said, God, that is, when in this context, God means God is something other than ourselves. That God is something other than ourselves is as real as the world, and both are as real as this ego. But if we know the reality of ourselves, we'll know that God alone is, and we are nothing other than that. And of course, the world is nothing other than that.
So getting to Rabi's question, would you say that we have to practice causeless awareness?
What is causeless awareness? Awareness is anyway causeless.
Yeah, I mean, without the cause or effect.
What we need to be aware of is, or what we are always aware. There's never a moment when we're not aware, I am. The problem is we overlook this. Though the awareness is always there, it's like the screen in a cinema. We sit in the cinema for 3 hours looking at a screen, but it's as if we never see the screen, because we're only interested in the fleeting pictures that are appearing and disappearing on the screen. We give more reality to the appearance than to the underlying reality. So Bhagavan says the underlying reality is our own being, I am. That is what we should keep our attention on. So it's not a matter of awareness. Awareness is always there. It's a matter of attention. Bhagavan said it's all a matter of attention.
Attention, yes, attention.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, Michael. So, in the last question for today, this was sent to me by Sanjay Logia a couple of days ago. So he wants to look at the note that Bhagavan left when he was a young boy. He left his home when he was moving from Madurai to Tiruvannamalai. And he left a note, which this time Michael is translated as, I, seeking my father as per his command, have set out leaving this place. This is entering only on a good kārya, the thing to be done. Therefore, anyone need not grieve for this kārya. So for seeing this, there is no need to expend any money. Your fees have not yet been paid. Rupees 2 thus, or together with this. And then he just put a dash without signing his name in that note. So the question that Sanjay had is what is the
Shall
accurate
I
English
take
translation
over
of
from
this
here?
letter?
Shall I take over
Yeah.
from here? So Sanjay's first question was, what is the accurate English translation of this? That
Yeah.
is what you've just read.
Right.
Then his second question is, what is the inner significance and implication of this letter? That is very nicely explained by Sadhu Om in Ramana Charita in a brief biography of Bhagavan, which is available on your Houston Ramana
Right.
Center
If you go to the
website.
biography page,
Yeah.
it's there. Yeah.
Yeah. What Sadhu Om says about that is there was no signature at the bottom of the note. He drew only a straight line. The wording and formation of the sentence here contain profound meaning and are most important. The insertion just after the word I of the phrase "in search of my father," more literally actually it's "seeking my father," that is Bhagavan, when he wrote the verse about the sentence, he wrote, I as per his command, have set out leaving this place. Then he added, he put an insertion, what in Tamil is called a hamsapadam, the foot of a swan. That is the mark that is a upward pointing arrow with a line going up, which is like the leg of a swan. It's called the hamsapada. It's an insertion mark. And he added there, in tapanare tedi kondu, seeking my father. So he added that. So what Sadhu Om says about that is the insertion just after the word I of the phrase seeking my father, holds a good lesson for those would-be Vedantins who merely talk of non-duality, namely the lesson that so long as ego, the individual sense of I, exists, it is wrong to deny the existence of God or to mock the individual's feeling of dualistic love towards him. That is, so long as we rise as ego, we see the world and we have to accept the existence of God. And it's obviously God that Bhagavan is referring to when he refers to my father. Instead of depending upon him as one's sole refuge. So it's wrong to deny the existence of God or to mock the individual's feeling of love, of dual love towards him, instead of depending upon him as one's sole refuge. That is, if we are a separate I, then we are wholly dependent on God. He is our sole refuge, is what is implied there. And then he says, this word I, the first word of the first sentence, then changes to this in the next sentence. That is, he begins by saying, in the first sentence he says, I, seeking my father, as per his command, have set out leaving this place. Then in the next sentence, instead of saying, I am entering only on a good kārya, he says, this is entering only on a good kārya. So he's referring to himself as this. And finally, this also vanishes, and the note ends without even a signature. Yes, the human body, which is felt to be I so long as the ahankara and mamakara. Ahankara means the ego, the I-ness, and mamakara is the mindness, the sense of mine. So long as these exist, this human body, which is felt to be I so long as the ahankara and mamakara exists, becomes this, an insentient and alien object, as soon as the ahankara and mamakara are surrendered to God. Finally, when the non-dual union with the Supreme occurs, what can remain other than the Supreme? It is this state of oneness which is shown by the absence even of a signature. Thus was not the state of perfect jnana shining in him even at the age of 16. That's what we can infer from this note. So that's the inner significance, and implication of this letter, then Sanjay's final question was, what could have compelled Bhagavan to write this letter? He could have easily left Madurai without writing such a letter. Yes, he could, but the fact is, his brother had asked him to take money from his aunt to pay his college fees. So the college fees were 5 rupees. He didn't need all the 5 rupees because he checked, he'd seen how much, he'd checked them to find out how far he has to go. And he thought 3 rupees will be sufficient for his journey. So he left 2 rupees. So the note was partly to accompany the 2 rupees that he left. Also, the more important thing is, Bhagavan is extremely considerate. He's the most considerate. When his thigh brushed against a bush, but in which there happened to be a hornet's nest, and when the hornets were thereby disturbed, Bhagavan was so considerate, he understood that he had inadvertently disturbed that hornet's nest. So when the hornets came swarming out, he just stood there and allowed them to sting his thigh. What can be more considerate than that? And because he just stood there and peacefully allowed them to sting his thigh to their heart's content, they stung only the thigh that brushed against the bush. They didn't sting any other part of his body. But that incident shows how considerate Bhagavan is. So being extremely considerate, if he had left home without saying anything, they would have been so worried. That's why he says, this is undertaking, this is entering only on a good kārya. That is, the undertaking is a good thing that I'm doing, that this is doing. Therefore, anyone need not grieve. No one need grieve for this. So he doesn't want anyone to lament about the fact that he's left or to worry about him. I'm taking on a good kārya. I'm going in seeking my father. So he wrote this note as a reassurance. So that shows the very considerate nature of Bhagavan. Yes, he could have left without writing anything, but because of his consideration, he not wanting. He would have known, but anyway, they'll be worried. But to alleviate their worry, he wrote like that.
I mean, it's decreases the worry to some extent, right? Like at least he's not killed or something, you know.
Yeah. He's not being suddenly
physically,
abducted.
Right.
I have a few questions on this, sir. 1 or 2 questions.
Yes.
Bhagavan says here, I seeking my father, but he had already sought his father. He was one with his father. So why this seeking my father?
Then why did he leave Madurai at all? Some power drew him to Arunachala. So we see, because when we talk about Bhagavan, we in our view, he seems to be a person. He seems to be a young boy of 16 who has had a death experience and has attained something and is now writing a note and leaving. Because in our view, he seems to be a person, then so long as we seem to be separate, we always have to be very humble. Once when twice a year, the Utsavamurti from the main temple and from the Adinamalai temple are taken around the hill. So one time when they were going around the hill, they stopped in front of Ramanashram, and Karparati, for those who don't know what that is, Karparam is the camphor, and Arati is the waving. So they light camphor on a tray, and they waved in front of a deity. Then that was brought to Bhagavan. And Bhagavan touched it with his hands like that, as is the custom, and he said, I think something to the effect,
Tahapanukul Mahan Udakam.
Apaku,
Mahan Udakam, yeah. Pillai Udakam or something like that. Yeah. So you can give the translation in English, yeah.
Yeah. It's sometimes translated, the son is beholden to the father. That's not quite. Adakam means, he's talking about our subsidence. We should always subside in front of God. We should always sink low. That is the meaning of namas. Namas means that bowing or prostrating. It's meant to signify the subsidence of ego. So we always have to be humble before God. Also, the same idea Bhagavan expresses in the, I think it's verse 39 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu Bōdham. This Advaita is to be always experience, we should always experience Advaita in the heart. We should not try to put Advaita in action. Even if we go to Brahma, Vishnu or Śiva and say you and I are one, we should never claim oneness with Guru. So for Bhagavan, Arunacha is his Guru. So he's always very humble before. So in that, with that bhava, he's going searching his father.
Likewise, sir, he says, as per his command. So what sort of a command was that? As per his command.
It doesn't, through silence. Right? That Arunacha doesn't teach in words. Arunacha teaches in silence. So Bhagavan felt that pull, and so he was pulled there. It was
it's a pull.
He very clearly saw that is what was to be. That's why when his mother, a couple of years later, when his mother came and pleaded with him to come back to Madurai, he kept silent. He had nothing to say to that. And when they asked him to at least write a reply on paper, he wrote, Avarava prarabdha prakaram adakanavan angangirindu artabipan. That is, in accordance with the prarabdha of each one, he who is for that will, being there, being in the heart of each of them, will cause to dance. So he was being, his body, speech, and mind were being made to act in accordance with, were being made by Arunacha to act in accordance with that, the prarabdha of that body. He doesn't have any prarabdha, but for so long as there's a body, there seems to be prarabdha. So, and he very clearly said to his mother, what is never to happen will not happen, however much you try. What is to happen will not stop, however much you try to prevent it. This is certain. Therefore, keeping silent is good.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Thank you, Sanjay. So and there is one last question from Angelica, and then we'll close out our session. Angelica, go ahead.
Thank you. If an apparent Śiva ceases to exist, I pray, will his karma get eradicated by this recognition and being self, and karma will continue to unfold from a different perspective and embracement, or actually ceases to exist in the apparent dream along with the Shiva's ego?
That is, we see Bhagavan as someone separate from us. So we see him doing actions and we see him experiencing things. So it seems to us as if there's still karma for him. They're still doing and they're still experiencing. But what he says in verse 38 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu is very, very clear. If we are the doer of action, we will experience the resulting fruit.
Right.
investigating who is the doer of action when one knows oneself. That implies when by investigating who is the doer of action, one knows oneself, doership will depart and all the three karmas will slip off. When he says doership will depart, that is, doership is the result of our identification with this bundle of five sheaves, which includes body and mind and speech, of course. Speech isn't one of the five sheaves, but it's all part of the mixture. So long as we rise as ego, we experience this bundle of five sheaves as ourself. And so the actions done by these are experienced by them as actions done by us. That is the doership. And so long as there's doership, there's also experiencership. As he says in the first sentence, if we have a doer of action, we will experience the resulting fruit. So when he says doership will depart, the implication is that experiencership will depart.
Yeah.
Without doership or experiencership, how can any of the three karmas exist? No. Because agamya, the actions we do under the sway of our vasanas, our will, that is the action. Those are the we can do those only so long as we identify this body, speech, and mind as ourself. So that doership goes, and the result, the experiencership, is also only for the person we seem to be. Right. It's only so long as we take ourselves to be a person that we seem to be experiencing the fruit of our past karmas. So all the three karmas, the agamya, that the actions we do under the sway of our will, the sanchita, the vast heap of the fruit of past actions that we've not yet experienced, and prarabdha, the fruit that is allotted for us to experience in this lifetime, all will slip off, all will cease to exist, because there can't be any karma without a doer and an experiencer. The doer and experiencer, of course, are the same one ego. When we know ourselves, that ego is destroyed, so doership and experiencership goes, all karmas come to an end. Then he says, Nittamam Mukti Nilay, the state of liberation which is eternal. That implies that this is the state of liberation which is eternal. Very, very important is this Nittamam, which is eternal, because the state of liberation, if the state of liberation was something that is newly acquired, what comes will go. But the reason it never goes is because it's ever existing. Even now we are liberated. Our present bondage is a mere appearance. So long as we rise as ego, we seem to be in bondage. But if we investigate ourselves to know who am I, the doer of action and the experiencer of the fruit of action, this ego will subside and dissolve back into its source, and then it'll be clear what we actually are is ever unchanging sat-cit, being awareness, ananda, happiness, where there's no change at all. So there is no karma whatsoever for the jnani.
Right.
There's karma for the person whom the jnani seems to be, but the jnani seems to be that person only in the view of the ajnanis, not in the view of the jnani.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Yeah, I mean, I understood all of this from the previous, but I guess in the eyes of the others, it will seem to continue and unfold. But obviously, from the jiva that has already realized there's no separation and everything, it's actually self. Obviously, this won't be not even a thing, right?
Yes.
I just wanted to confirm, like in the eyes of apparent others that are actually the same, will apparently seem to continue to unfold.
Yes.
But it is not.
As Bhagavan said, because you mistake yourself to be the body, you mistake me to be the body. So we see him as a body only because we experience ourselves as a body. So if we want to know Bhagavan as he actually is, we need to know ourselves as we actually are, because he is what we actually are. It's only out of his grace that he has appeared outwardly in human form in order to give us these teachings to turn, and the essence of the teachings is look within, see what you actually are.
Yes, and therefore there's no others, and even though
But yeah.
it's all,
Yeah. So
it's
long as we
all-
rise as ego, there's the appearance of others. When we know ourselves as we actually are, we will know that we are one only without a second. There are no others.